Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we will discuss again digitizing photos with the digital camera, and today I get for the review the Meike 60mm f2.8 lens, and this is crazy affordable lens for Fujifilm system. I think most of us nowadays switched or to Sony or to Fujifilm, and this is how it goes nowadays. And I think for Fujifilm, which I use for filming this video, this is one of the best for the buck lenses what you can find on the market. Nobody kind of talk about it, and this is why I get it for the review. And it's not only good lens for reproduction, which I will also show in this video, but it's also crazy good lens for macro photography and some small macro shots, which I rarely use, but sometimes use. And as you remember on this channel, I have a review of the different lens, and this was Laowa lens with a 2x macro, so it's 1:2 ratio. And I completely don't like the feel from the lens in terms of the macro photos itself. So it was really good for digitizing the photos, but I cannot use it for anything else. And it was actually almost 2.5 times more expensive than this lens, and I think below $300 this is one of the best lenses what you can get for the money. So let's start with unboxing, and after that let's cover some details and my feelings about this lens and how it looks, how it performs, and I will also show a little bit of macro work, and I will also show a little bit of video of the macro work. So stay tuned and let's unbox. The lens itself goes in this small package, and it's relatively lightweight. It's a 60mm lens with the APS-C sensor for f2.8. Technically I think this lens close to the competitors. It's 8 groups and 11 elements, f2.8 and 60mm, and it's fully manual focus. So I think we just need to open the box and take a look how the lens feels and looks and from which materials it's made. I still remember the times when you can buy the lens for the same price and the lens was completely plastic, for example from Canon or even from Nikon, but usually Canon's in 2000s was completely horrible with the plastic even mounts and fully plastic construction. Usually these lenses goes in this kind of pouches, and inside the box I think you have almost nothing. You have some manual, and I think that's it, and you don't really have anything in the bottom of the box, because I usually checked it. Some lenses have a pouch there, but I don't need it anyway. So let's remove the box, check what we have here. Yeah, this is just warranty papers for the lens, nothing interesting, and I think we just need to go and look on the lens and how it works and feels mechanically. I think the first impression is extremely lightweight. It's literally weight nothing. It's weight even less than my Fujifilm lenses, and it feels cold, so it means it's not plastic. I think it's made from aluminum, and the front and the back cap made from plastic. And I'm quite surprised that it's stepless aperture, which I honestly prefer for task what I'm referring to, the scanning film. Honestly, I'm quite surprised that you can pull up so much details for this price point of the lens, and that you can actually use the machined parts like a mount, which not made from the plastic. You can actually make a lot of stuff like a helicoids inside, which performs extremely smooth, and you have a long throw focus there. And I really like that it's a universal lens, so you can adapt it for different mounts, and I think you can buy it for Fuji, for Nikon, for Canon. And it's definitely made from metal, and I really like that it's compact, light, and in the same times I don't see any difference from the much more expensive competitors of this lens. So after mechanical point, let's start to make use of this lens. As you probably understand, and as I showed in the previous videos, I will use it for scanning of the film, and now I will try to mount it and make a first scans. As you probably understand, the advantage of the macro lens is a close focus. For example, I cannot digitize anything with my standard 23 or 35mm lens on the crop sensor, just because I cannot get it close enough. But in the same time, additional advantage of the lens, it's actually flat field, so it's not completely flat field lens, but in terms of the macro lenses, you can actually say that it's close enough to reproduce the image with completely flat focus. So it would give you advantage. how it represents your photos, because we want to scan completely flat material to the lens and reproduce it to the matrix of the film completely one-to-one and make everything flat as possible and everything in focus as possible. And as I said, for my application, it's quite nice that it has a clickless aperture. First of all, you can adjust exposure while you're filming, and second thing, you actually can choose the micro adjustments for scanning of the film and only touch aperture a little bit, because it has a sub steps between the exposures and you don't need to adjust it with the 1/3 of the step. So it's quite nice to dial in completely your exposures and see that the channels is actually biased to the normal range of your exposure in the matrix. So it can be even more precise than you need, and I think it's just faster to adjust it mechanically on the aperture than to change the shutter speeds. So overall experience is quite nice, and I think we will look in the photo results a little bit later. I will also use this lens for reproduction of my prints, because I really like the idea to post the finalized product of your darkroom work. And I'm actually a little bit struggling with the scanning of my photos, and because it doesn't really make any sense, and I want to see the volume of the print itself when I hang it somewhere, or if it's finalized product and finalized finished art. So overall, I want a little bit more representation as a real product, but in the same time I'm photographing the flat objects. In general, it works quite nicely with the representation what I have now. I can make photos of my prints on a table with my standard lens, but if you imagine that you need a close-up of the print and at the same time you don't want to see the distortion of the edges and you just want to make one-to-one reproduction of the print, it can be a little bit challenging. And also, if you have a 60mm, I think you just have more ability to reduce all the distortions what can be in the lens, because after 50mm up to 150mm, something like this, it's one of the best lenses what you can optically produce without any problems. But unfortunately, with my standard stand, this lens a little bit too far away and I cannot really zoom it on this stand. But when I switch the lenses, you can actually see how much resolution the lens itself has. And what is funny, the lens what I'm using from Fujifilm on my camera, it's much more expensive than this lens. But honestly, in terms of quality, I don't see any big difference between both of them, which is quite nice, and I don't see any artifacts or problems with the lens in general, so it's quite nice to focus. It doesn't really have a lot of breathing. So I think in future I will also use it for some tight shots and just some macro work in my videos on YouTube, because I really like overall look and how the autofocus area looks like. And I will also throw in a little bit of macro videos here, because I want to push the lens a little bit more, and with a fully open aperture on 2.8 I still don't see any problems with the color, and the lens itself looks extremely well with the color corrected, so it's chromatically corrected. You don't really have any color fringes on any point of the video, and in the same time the lens itself has some really good aesthetic quality of the autofocus and the plane of focus, so I really like it also as a portrait lens, and also I really like it as a really good macro lens. So also, if you're looking for this lens, not in terms of what I'm discussing here in this video, that is copy of the photos and making negative scans, I think it's really good lens for actually macro work. It's almost sharp and 2.8, but on f4 or f8, which usually people do with the macro photos, it's almost pristine and I don't see any distortion and I don't see any discoloration or color fringes or strange behavior. So overall, I'm really happy about this lens, and I think it's really good even for videos and making macro photos overall. But let's go back a little bit to the scanning. This is how the lens looks, and this is how the whole setup looks. It's not far away from the camera. And also in comparison to the Nikon setup, I can see the screen there in real time. I can double click, make a focus on a grain. I can see the exposure. I can also just simply click and make a photo and advance the film. So it's just cheaper, easier, more modern setup than the old Nikon setup. Yes, you have a little bit difference in the resolution in terms of the pixels, but I think you don't really have a difference in the optical resolution there. But we will discuss it a little bit later when I will show the results of the photos. And this is more or less the same setup what I made before with the Nikon camera and the 100mm macro lens. So now we can compare these two lenses with the Meike 60mm f2.8 and the 100mm Nikon lens with the vibration reduction and with the higher resolution, and we can see if I can actually notice any difference on my negatives. And also what is funny, I cannot see huge difference between the Fujifilm lenses and these lenses from Meike. In terms of overall build quality, color and the material finish and just surface how it's made, it's almost the same quality what is expensive Fujifilm lenses. I made a comparison shot of all of the frames with the different apertures to find out which aperture is actually one of the best on the lenses. And usually it's not really easy task to find out, and sometimes I just look on the corners of the apertures. So for example, the first shot with the F2.8, you can see it's a little bit soft here in the corner, and also in the last one you can see it's a little bit soft of F22, and this is how the normal lenses should work. But if we go from F4, you already can see the improvement in sharpness there, and if we click to something like f5.6 or even f8, you can see that here you can see the full resolution and you can see the even color clouds of the negative film. It means the film itself resolved completely and you don't need any more resolution from the film. You actually captured all the details from the color. You can capture all the details of sharpness which you can have from the 35mm film. If you compare two shots, you can actually see that on the Fujifilm, especially here in the chimney tubes, you have a little bit more sharpness in the edges. I'm not sure why it's like this, but also keep in mind that on the Nikon itself you have more pixel density and more megapixels. So it means probably on Nikon is already too much megapixels for this application and you cannot really see more details than it actually exists in the film. But here you can see a little bit of the color noise, but this is not real color noise, it's actually color noise from the film. It's a different clouds which is a little bit masked here, so it's not fully resolved, and also maybe just the matrix itself on the Fujifilm nowadays, because it's a 10-year gap or even more between the two technologies and two matrices. Here it's a little bit more clean in terms of the color and the reproduction. So overall, I'm actually more happier with the Fujifilm setup, especially if you compare the price of this lens and this lens for this such a simple application for the lens. I think this lens just gives a little bit more punch and works a little bit better. And as a bonus, I want to throw a little bit of video in the end how the lens actually performs. Because my camera have a matrix stabilization, I can easily pull the focus and handheld this lens, which is 60mm, and this is quite surprising, and I still cannot believe that how well this lens performs in terms of the image quality. Not because of the resolution, but in general how the autofocus area looks like. Everything is smooth, everything is so much vivid and contrast, and I really like the whole result of the lens itself and how closely it can focus to the small objects in the same time and perform the long shots with a small and really narrow depth of field. This lens almost doesn't really have a focus breathing, and you can use it for videos. It's a long throw focus. It's extremely good in terms of color and the shape of the shot. So I hope you really like this type of reviews, and I will try to do something like this in future and involve a little bit of modern technology in the darkroom and the copying of the photos. So thank you for watching and see you in the next videos. Bye.